You're on the front row.
Well, I didn't want to be there. We're far apart.
All right. How are you guys? Seems like it's been a while since I've been here. I know. Yeah, several things been going on, and it seemed like that when COVID started coming back on, it was just like one right after another. I was always around, so it was. When you're in healthcare, you're all around it anyways, and then just constantly. So it's the rules are a little bit different. So I was just trying to be a little careful. If I didn't have to be around a bunch of people, I wouldn't. So
You have to be with people. That's your job.
Yeah.
You have to be with other people.
Yeah, so but in big groups and stuff, I was trying to avoid that for a few weeks, but it's good to be back with you guys. How's everybody else doing? Doing good? Yeah. We have anybody that we need to pray for tonight?
Well, there's several. Sydney and Honey's baby
Okay.
is.
You got a pen? You got a pen?
Although they've gotten a little better news, I think, on him past few days, but and Brent and his heart condition, and but I can't think of everybody that was in the bulletin, but there's Byram's. Yeah, Byram's still.
What is this now? I didn't even know that. Anybody else?
Folks down in Baja, they also, different ones have had the virus.
Yeah. I was reading something on one of Paulina's. Yeah, it seemed like they were really having a tough time of it, and then, the treatments they have and the protection they have is like so much different than. Well, I was reading one of her posts, and it was talking about like some of the recommended treatments for it, and I was like, oh my goodness, no wonder it's spreading so much. They just don't have anything to work with down there. Anything else? All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we have to be together, time that we have to fellowship with each other, time that we have to study your word, just to be together. We want to come to you lifting up a few. We want you to be with Sydney and Honey and the baby. Pray that they continue to receive better news and safe and healthy delivery and baby. Pray that you'll be with Brent and his continued struggles with his heart condition, and to help to heal him, to help the best recovery that he can. Pray that you'll be with Byram's, Jeff and Sonia, as they are dealing with COVID, and so many others who are being affected by this disease, and either primarily themselves or secondarily with loved ones being affected, losing loved ones. There's so many suffering because of it, and pray that you'll be with them, and pray that you'll be with all the healthcare professionals there dealing with it and helping to come up with a solution to it and a cure for it, and pray that this vaccine does help, and continue to be with everyone that's involved with that. Pray that you'll be with fellow Christians down in Baja, and that the COVID disease is affecting them, and pray that you'll be with the churches, the people of the churches that we're involved with there as well, and help us to help them as we need to, but also to help to comfort them and to protect them as well. Pray that you will be with us tonight as we study your word, and bless our study. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So used to having a mask on, I forgot to take it off. All right, so if you remember a few weeks ago, however long it's been, we got in just a little bit of a secondary discussion on the image of God and what all that means. And, from there, it took off on a little bit of a study. So we're going to begin and talk about it like that, but what it's going to lead us into is talking about justice, okay? Just the word justice. And myself, I like to take a topic. I'm not real good at just sitting down and reading, Matthew, Mark. I have to take a topic or a word or something and read and study that way. That's the way I learn the best and sort of enjoy the best as well. I think I remember Johnny doing that several of the men's classes, to take a word, and that's something that I enjoy as well. So we're going to start off in Genesis. Just be there for a minute. I can read it if you don't want to turn there. But Genesis 1:26 through 28. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and of every living thing that moves on the earth.'" So a couple of things there, as we see that man was created in God's image. And we, as Christians, believe that God is a just God, okay? And as humans, if we're created in his image, then we are just as well. And then God, a couple of things, other things is the words that he used of having dominion and then subduing it. The word subdue, actually means to rule over, okay? Is another way to say it. So to rule over with God's, going through us, God ruling through the earth right there, okay? As we see very quickly, though, we mess it up. Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel. All the stories throughout Genesis are about us messing that justice up, okay? And then you have the Israelites, and then you have Jesus and the Christians who, throughout the Bible, God trying to restore justice to the world. And so that's what I want us to talk a little bit about. What's that word mean? We throw around a lot of words that sometimes can be hard to understand. And I think if we understand them a little better, it helps us as Christians, but also helps us to understand a little bit more of what God wants for us and how to understand what he's telling us. I'm going to start off with just a little bit of a video. It's from the Bible Project. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think it's like 5 minutes long. Just sort of get us thinking along these lines. And if I think you've been in a men's class, you've probably seen this before. I've used it before. But I think it's like 5 minutes. We'll start with that. Just sort of get us thinking a little bit. Then we'll go through 4 or 5 scriptures and have some discussion on that. Ryan, you can go ahead and play it.
If you were a praying mantis, it would be socially acceptable to devour your mate.
And if you're a honey badger, you have no regard for other animals. You don't care.
If you're a panda with twins, it's normal to abandon one to take care of the other.
But if humans do any of these things, we would call it wrong, unfair, or unjust.
Yeah, why is that? Why do humans care so much about justice?
Well, the Bible has a fascinating response to that question. On page 1, humans are set apart from all other creatures as the image of God.
Yeah, God's representatives who rule the world by his definition of good and evil.
And this identity, it's the bedrock of the Bible's view of justice. All humans are equal before God and have the right to be treated with dignity and fairness no matter who you are.
And that would be nice if we all did that. But we know how the world really works.
And the Bible addresses that too. It shows how we are constantly redefining good and evil to our own advantage at the expense of others.
Yeah, self-preservation. And the weaker someone is, the easier it is to take advantage of them.
And so in the biblical story, we see this happening on a personal level, but also in families, and then in communities, and in whole civilizations that create injustice, especially towards the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end there. Out of this whole mess, God chose a man named Abraham to start a new kind of family. Specifically, Abraham was to teach his family to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
Yeah, doing righteousness, that's a Bible word I don't really use, but what comes to mind is being a good person.
But what does that even mean, being good? The biblical Hebrew word for righteousness is tzedakah, and it's more specific. It's an ethical standard that refers to right relationships between people. It's about treating others as the image of God,
With the God-given dignity they deserve.
And this word justice, it's the Hebrew word mishpat. It can refer to retributive justice.
Like if I steal something, I pay the consequences.
Exactly. Yet most often in the Bible, mishpat refers to restorative justice. It means going a step further, actually seeking out vulnerable people who are being taken advantage of and helping them.
Yeah, some people call this charity.
But mishpat involves way more. It means taking steps to advocate for the vulnerable and changing social structures to prevent injustice.
So justice and righteousness are about a radical, selfless way of life.
Yeah, and you find this idea all over the Bible. Like here, in the book of Proverbs, what does it mean to bring about just righteousness?
Open your mouth for those who can't speak for themselves.
And what do these words mean for the prophets, like Jeremiah?
Rescue the disadvantaged, and don't tolerate oppression or violence against the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow.
And like here, look in the book of Psalms.
The Lord God upholds justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, and sets the prisoner free. But he thwarts the way of the wicked. Whoa, he thwarts the wicked?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the word wicked is rasha. It means guilty or in the wrong. It refers to someone who mistreats another human, ignoring their dignity as an image of God.
So justice and righteousness is a big deal to God.
Yes, it's what Abraham's family, the Israelites, were to be all about. They ended up as immigrant slaves, being oppressed unjustly in Egypt. And so God confronted Egypt's evil, declaring them to be rasha, guilty of injustice. And so he rescued Israel. But the tragic irony of the Old Testament story is that these redeemed people went on to commit the same acts of injustice against the vulnerable. And so God sent prophets who declared Israel guilty.
But they weren't the only ones. There's injustice everywhere.
Yeah, some people actively perpetrate injustice. Others receive benefits or privileges from unjust social structures they take for granted. And sadly, history has shown that when the oppressed gain power, they often become oppressors themselves.
So we all participate in injustice, actively or passively, even unintentionally. We're all the guilty ones.
And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet he died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them.
The earliest followers of Jesus experienced this righteousness from God, not just as a new status, but as a power that changed their lives and compelled them to act in surprising new ways.
Yeah, if God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others.
This is a radical way of life, and it's not always convenient or easy. It's courageously making other people's problems my problems.
This is what Jesus meant by loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about a lifetime commitment fueled by the words of the ancient prophet Micah. God has told you, humans, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
All right, Ryan. Y'all hear me?
Hey, this
okay?
is John and Tim from the Bible.
I'm going to leave my mask on if that's all right. So you can hear me, I think, pretty good. All right, so anything with that? I just sort of wanted to listen to that. There's a lot in there. We'll unpack some of it, but just anything that comes out from that. If not, let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 17 through 22. And I'm going to ask somebody to read that for me if they don't care. And then we'll go through a little bit of discussion. We got any volunteers to read that?
What was it again?
Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 17 through 22.
17, there it is. Do not deny justice to a foreigner or a fatherless child, and do not take a widow's garment as security. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I am commanding you to do this. When you reap the harvest in your field, and you forget a sheaf in the field, do not go back to get it. It is to be left for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you knock down the fruit from your olive tree, you must not go over the branches again. What remains will be for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you must not glean what is left. What remains will be for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this.
Okay. So, anything that stands out in those verses for you?
The repetition of, well, mine says resident, foreigner, orphan, and widow.
Yeah. Foreigner, orphan, and widow is repeated, and you see that throughout. Anything else?
Well, to me, it sounds like the attitude of hoarding, you know.
Yeah.
When the pandemic started, people were hoarding essentials.
Yeah.
You know, they were just gathering. You could see shopping carts loaded down. You know, that may be the wrong attitude. You know, kind of leave things for other people. You know, you're not the only one in a bad time. You leave, just get what you need, and leave
Leave a little
rest.
extra.
Yeah, leave a little extra. Yeah.
The fact that he's talking to them about resident foreigners,
Mm-hmm.
aliens to us, or immigrants maybe, you know, we might not always take a kind look at folks that are in the country illegally.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they were brought in there in Egypt they were in Egypt by their first choice, right?
Someone unfamiliar with us, you know.
Yep.
You know, not necessarily foreigner, but just someone that we're not familiar with, you know. Anything else?
I was going to say that there's really very few of the prophets. In fact, I'm not sure there's any of the prophets that don't touch on that topic in one way or another. It's in the Psalms, and it's in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, and all through all the prophets.
Yeah, there was, I think it was Jeremiah, maybe. That it was almost the exact same wording. All those things I had down as well, but there was another one that I thought really hit this topic of justice really well, especially from our standpoint. Is he said, I think he said it twice. He said, remember that you used to be in Egypt. What do you think they meant by that?
Well, the tables were turned at that point. They were the
Right.
resident foreigners.
Yeah. So I think that tells us, you know, well, we'll get to a little bit more in a minute, but tells us to, you know, sort of humble ourselves. This could be you, okay, very easily, you know. We could be in that shape. We're all just a very one or two steps away from different types of vulnerabilities, okay? But sometimes we go through life and don't remember that, and then because of that, we're not humbled. We don't think about that. We don't think of others as much as we should. Like they were, you know, they weren't thinking of the orphans. They weren't thinking of the foreigners, the widows, that type of thing. And we'll see this. We'll talk about this a little bit more too. Anything else? So all those things, that's a lot in a few verses.
With the comments about, when you go through the harvest, just do it one time and leave the rest.
Yeah.
I guess the folks that would keep going back and going back were just trying to drain the vines from everything they had so that they could sell it.
Yeah.
And therefore that becomes a greed thing.
And it sounded like they had plenty. It wasn't like they were needing, if there's extra there, then you would have taken it then, but then apparently they were going back and not,
And Dennis, there were a lot of things in the Hebrew law about that. This is the law of the Gleaner, and but they also had a tithe that went to those who couldn't provide for themselves, and so there were a number of different things that God had built in for those who were unable to provide for themselves.
And you even had the Jubilee year, wasn't it like when all the debts are forgiven,
Mm-hmm.
All right. And we will not get any political discussions on that.
Well, I think, too, that one of the keys is people who can't provide for themselves.
Yeah.
There's a difference between somebody who can't provide for themselves and somebody who won't provide for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And God never said to do that for people who just wouldn't, who could but wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. Those who are in general need. All right.
So that point,
go ahead.
You recognize that the folks that were coming through after the initial harvest, they're still working for it.
Yeah.
They had to go to the
They
field.
were,
They had
true.
to do it. It's
hadn't
not
thought
like
about
it
it.
was a freebie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't grow the field. and
Leave
you
it
didn't-
for them if they wanted. That's a good point.
You still got to work for it a
Yeah.
bit.
I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a good point. All right. Anything else before we go into a different question, I guess? All right. So along those same lines, who do you feel like the vulnerable are? I never can say that word. Vulnerable are today. I think we can still say, that list, okay? But it's, in today's time, what are some other things?
You might have children in there now.
Say it again. Children? In what way?
I just think about, it seems like the term that comes to mind now is latchkey kids. Or
Okay.
maybe if they don't go to school, they have
Oh,
virtual
gotcha,
school,
gotcha,
they're not
gotcha,
solo,
yeah.
But anyway, the list of the three still here,
Yeah.
but if you added the children that have to kind of look out after themselves,
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's huge.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought of as, everything that's going on, the vulnerabilities that COVID has caused, whether it's financial, gosh, there's so many people grieving with loved ones. We've got the elderly who just can't get out, and there's just so much going on today that there is all kinds of vulnerabilities out there, I think that's what makes this time so tough, it's, you just can't leave it, you can't get away from it, Anything else that you guys can think of? I think there's a lot of vulnerability out there because of, misinformation or not able to, being misled. I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there that's leading a lot of people, wrong directions. All right, so how does recognizing, and this sort of goes back to that you were once in Egypt type thinking, okay? How does recognizing that you have also been redeemed by Jesus impact how you think about yourself and others? How does recognizing that you have also been redeemed by Jesus impact how you think about yourself and others?
Dennis, I think part of it is what I mentioned a minute ago. God does for us what we can't do for ourselves.
Right.
We can't save ourselves.
Yeah.
And Jesus came to give us salvation because we weren't able to provide that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so the more we do that, the more we provide for people who can't provide for themselves, the more we're like God.
Yeah. And also, I think it's humbling that you see yourself and you see God forgiving you. And then I think sometimes we sort of lose that humbleness, especially when we're dealing with others who are dealing with sin. We forget about, at one time that was us, and it could have been us 5 minutes ago, okay? And so the vulnerabilities that they have because of their sin, I think we got to sort of humble ourselves and say, we need to help them, we need to build them up and not push them down, I think because, we're really, in that same situation, but God's forgiving us, and that's what keeps us going and gives us hope, But without God and that knowledge and Jesus, there's not much hope, for those individuals. And that's why it's so hard to get out of it sometimes.
During that animation, I noticed that some of the characters had to step down. During the animation, some of the characters had to step down to help somebody else up.
Right.
And that's that humility you were talking about. You have to humble yourselves to help people. You can't have this attitude, that you're untouchable and you're almighty and things are perfect. Sometimes you have to help somebody, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to get down to their level to help them up.
Sometimes you got to walk in their steps.
Yeah, most certainly. Mm-hmm.
Walk alongside them in the situation they're at. If we were, and I always think about this a lot, is if I was born in certain circumstances, where would I be? It's always hard to think about, but a lot of people end up in the positions that they couldn't help, and they're pulling themselves out of that all their life.
Dennis?
Yep.
I'm thinking that if we keep in our minds what God has done for us, an attitude of thankfulness fosters humility and benevolence. The more you think about how much has been done for you, the more less likely you are to feel bad about helping somebody else. At least that's the way I am. I think most people are.
And that's what's so powerful. To me, I totally agree about the cross. Of being able to go back to that so much in your life. It's not only just the power of salvation that it had, but to go back and see the humility, the love that God had for us and Jesus was able to give for us, and to keep us going. And how many millions of people, that gives hope to, and the thankfulness of that. So, totally agree with you. All right. We're going to leave Deuteronomy. You got anything else from that? What time do we end, Ralph?
22.
Okay. Let's go to Isaiah 58. I think this is a really good one. Isaiah chapter 58, verses 1 through 14. And again, if someone doesn't mind to read.
Isaiah 58, 1 through 14.
Yeah.
Cry out loudly, don't hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Tell my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sins. They seek me day after day and delight to know my ways, like a nation that does what is right and does not abandon the justice of their God. They ask me for righteous judgments. They delight in their nearness of God. Why have we fasted, but you have not seen? We have denied ourselves, but you haven't noticed. Look, you do as you please on the day of your fast and oppress all of your workers. You fast with contention and strife, to strike viciously with your fist. You cannot fast as you do today, hoping to make your voice heard on high. Will the fast I choose be like this? A day for a person to deny himself, to bow his head like a reed, and to spread out sackcloth and ashes. Will you call this a fast and a day acceptable to the Lord? Isn't the fast I choose to break the chains of wickedness, to untie the ropes of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and to tear off every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the poor and homeless to your house, to clothe the naked when you see him, and not to ignore your own flesh and blood? Then your light will appear like the dawn, and your recovery will come quickly. Your righteousness will go before you, and the Lord's glory will be your rear guard. At that time, when you call, the Lord will answer. When you cry out, he will say, Here I am. If you get rid of the yoke among you, the finger-pointing and malicious speaking, and if you offer yourself to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted one, then your light will shine in the darkness, and your night will be like noonday. The Lord will always lead you, satisfy you in a parched land, and strengthen your bones. You will be like a watered garden and like a spring whose waters never run dry. Some of you will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will restore the foundations laid long ago. You will be called the repairer of broken walls, the restorer of streets where people live. If you keep from desecrating the Sabbath, from doing whatever you want on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own way, seeking your own pleasure, or talking too much, then you will delight yourself in the Lord, and I will make you ride over the heights of the land and let you enjoy the heritage of your father Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
Okay. All right. I guess, does anything about this passage surprise you?
It's pretty consistent with things all through the Bible. He says you're going through the motions, but you're not really living, you're not really living the way you ought to live.
Right.
You're worshiping and fasting and going through the motions, but you're not really who you ought to be.
Yeah, it's not changing you to affect that justice that he's talking about. And that's what we're talking about now. Justice in the world, justice, and that's God trying to restore how we should treat others. God trying to restore, the things that other humans are bringing down. But I think it is. I mean, you look at it, without knowing the Bible, okay, and you just take those first few verses, and they're fasting, they're praying, they're worshiping. God didn't say you need to sacrifice more to the altar for me, okay? He wasn't looking more for him, okay? What was he looking for? That's sort of surprising, All other gods, it's all about them, okay? But the God of Israel here, he's saying, hey, you're fasting for me, but you're not doing this for the others, What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, they're obviously going through the motion.
Yeah.
The attitude's just not there.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where your fasting is accompanied by arguments, brawls, and fist fights. That's kind of getting with it.
Yeah. Yeah. The mind is not in the right place. All right. So I guess along those same, sometimes do you feel like, in what ways do we sometimes focus on the external practices rather than what God thinks and feels about this? What do you... And I guess sort of to frame it is, look at today's times, okay? We can't meet together like we want to, or, for the right reasons, does that keep us from being a Christian out there? Okay? There's vulnerable people out there. There's a lot of people that need our help. It doesn't keep us so, it's good to come and to do those things, okay? But those things God had us to do to change us. It's not just for Him. He does it to change us so that we can be that justice in the world and doing the things that we need to be doing to change our hearts so that we can be out there. As those external type worshiping, I guess what you could say.
Or the acts thereof.
Yeah.
You're going through the motions, but they're hollow.
Right.
Even to the point of prayer.
Yeah.
And that's not what He's looking for.
And the Lord's Supper, we come here if we're just doing it, if it's not a thoughtful process about it, and as Wayne was talking about seeing, the sacrifice of Jesus and letting us change us, then, it's not as effective as it should be, okay, and we're not going to be changed.
Well, you mentioned the Lord's Supper, that's an excellent example. If we don't do that the way He expects us to, we actually condemn ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a pretty serious concept.
And the Corinthians, what was it that they weren't doing?
Well, they were actually, weren't they having a feast and getting drunk and not waiting on everybody?
Well, that was it. That's what he was so mad about, is they were sitting here in this one room, in the big room, eating, drinking, being merry, and not waiting for those who live so far away to get there. That's what he was so mad about. That's what Paul was getting on him so hard. This is not the right thing to do. You're not thinking of the others out there. It's a perfect example of what they're talking about here. It was a ritual for them. Wasn't something that was like, you missed it. You're thinking about this the wrong way. And here's the proof. These people haven't even got here yet. All right, we got just a minute. I guess we'll end up. What injustices grieves you the most right now? And I'm asking you that because, sort of put it on your heart, of what can, is there something I can do about it, What are some things that are out there now that...
Well, if you're thinking of COVID, what disturbs me the most is the way the small business owners being used.
And we got an amen up front.
The government makes it sound like the virus has got a brain. You can decide whether you sell alcohol or you don't, or you have outside or your inside. And it's like, man,
even keeping the political part out of it. I mean, there's small business people that are hurting, okay? And, we need to help them out however we can, What are some other things? COVID's a big part of it, but there's a lot of other things out there.
For me, this has been this way since I was aware of the practice it's abortion. You can't find a more innocent victim than it is. And the fact that today that they basically, the idea of they broached it, at least silently, the idea of even fourth trimester, quote unquote, fourth trimester abortions. And if we can do it right up to the point, then why not a little bit after, And so to me, that's, you can't find a more innocent, helpless human. There's just they're not out there. They can't run. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the one that gets me more than anything else. All this other stuff is almost superfluous compared to that. I mean, there's, at some point in your life, even if it's bad, you have some control over your actions. You can do something. You can take action, and even oppressed people can take action for themselves. But boy, unborn children, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely zero. And they're totally relying on us then, people who are alive.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So I guess whoever's next, and we may just take off on this a little bit more whenever my time comes up next, I guess. I mean, hopefully tonight has been, thinking about, God created us in His image. God's true purpose is trying to bring justice back to a falling world, and we're part of that as being Christians. The hope that we have through Jesus, the example that He's gave to us, is our guiding light, I guess. And there's a lot of injustices out there, and if the Christians don't do something about it, then nobody's really going to do it. So I think there's a lot we can do. Thanks.